There is a coffee can of gray powder sitting on a shelf in my barn that costs about $2 to fill, and it has kept 14 barn cats free of fleas for as long as I have been alive. The pet aisle in town wants $30 a month for 1 drop of chemical on the back of a cat's neck, and the whole time the real problem is not even on the cat. Do you want to know where the fleas in your house actually live? My name is Rebecca. I am Amish. I live on a dairy farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, with my parents, my brothers and sisters, 42 milk cows, and 14 barn cats. The cats are not pets the way English folks keep pets. They are workers. They keep the mice out of the feed room and the rats out of the corn crib, and in return they get milk at morning chores, a warm loft full of hay, and a family that looks at them every single day. Last August, in the worst flea year anyone could remember, a neighbor woman stopped her car at the end of our lane. She had a scratching, miserable house cat in a carrier and a vet bill in her purse for $280. It was a hot evening. The cows were in for milking and the swallows were working the yard, and she stood at the fence and watched our cats for a long minute before she said a word. Flea treatment, flea shampoo, a pill, and a tube of drops for the neck. The fleas came back in 11 days. She wanted to know why our barn cats, who sleep in hay and hunt in the weeds, were sitting on our porch rail, sleek and calm and not scratching at all. I want to tell you what I told her, but first I have to tell you about the time I got it wrong myself, because I did. When I was 9, my favorite cat was a gray Tom named Smoke, and one summer he scratched himself raw behind both ears. I cried until my father hitched the horse and took him to town. The treatment worked for about 2 weeks. Then the fleas were back, worse than before, and I could not understand it. The cat had been cleaned head to tail. Where did they come from? My grandmother watched me fussing over him on the porch step and said something I did not understand for years. She said, "You washed the cat, but nobody washed the barn." Quick word before I go further. The old methods my family uses, there is more of it than fits in any one video. I gathered the whole of it into a book you can buy in our pinned comment below. The book is the long version. If you want it, it is there. I will not mention it again. So there I was, 9 years old, holding a clean cat that was crawling with fleas again, and my grandmother talking about washing the barn. It made no sense to me. The fleas were on the cat. I could see them on the cat. I had picked them off the cat with my own fingers. Why would the barn matter? That question sat in my head for a long time, and the answer to it is the whole secret. It is the reason my neighbor spent $280 for 11 days of peace. And it is the reason our coffee can of $2 powder has worked for 100 years and longer. Because here's the thing nobody at the pet counter will tell you, and it changes everything once you know it. The fleas you can see on your cat are not the flea problem. They are the smallest part of the flea problem. If you counted every flea in a flea-troubled house, only about 5 out of every 100 would be on the animal. So where are the other 95? And what do you suppose happens when you treat the 5 and ignore the 95? Let me tell you where they are, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. A grown flea lives on the cat and drinks her blood, but she does not raise her young there. She lays her eggs in the cat's fur, as many as 50 a day, and those eggs are smooth and dry like tiny grains of salt. They do not stick. They fall. They fall wherever the cat walks, sleeps, and sits. Into the hay, into the cracks between the floorboards, into the carpet, into the couch cushions, and the cat's bed, and the rug by the kitchen door. Down there in the dark, they hatch into little larvae that eat dust and dirt, then spin themselves a cocoon and wait. And here is the part that should make you sit up. A flea in a cocoon can wait for months. It can wait through a whole winter. It waits until it feels the warmth and footsteps of an animal walking by, and then it hatches in seconds and jumps aboard. Think about what that means. From egg to biting adult takes as little as 3 weeks in warm weather, and every female that makes it aboard your cat starts laying 50 eggs a day of her own within 2 days of her first meal. 1 flea in June is 1,000 fleas by August. The numbers are not on your side, and they were never going to be, as long as you were only fighting the ones you could see. That is why Smoke came home clean and was crawling again in 2 weeks. He walked back into a barn floor full of cocoons. That is why my neighbor's 11 days of peace ended. Her house was the hatchery. Her cat was just the dinner table. So now you understand what the pet industry sells you. The drops on the neck, the pills, the shampoos, they treat the 5 fleas out of 100, the ones on the animal, and they do it month after month at $20 to $30 a month per animal, forever. Some of those chemicals work. I will not pretend they do not. But you are buying them again every 30 days because the source is never touched. And lately, even the English vets will tell you the fleas in some places are getting harder to kill with the same old chemicals, because any living thing that meets the same poison over and over long enough finds a way around it. It is the same story as the weeds in the corn and the germs in the hospitals. Chemistry is a war. The small things eventually win because they breed faster than we invent. Physics is different. Physics does not wear out. Now here is the contrast, and it is sharp. The powder in our coffee does not poison anything. It is not a chemical the flea can get used to. It kills by touch, the way a knife cuts, and no flea in 100 years has ever learned to resist being cut. And I have to be honest with you about the title of this video because honesty is worth more than a good title. It is not true that Amish farms never see a vet. When a cow gets a torn hoof, we call the vet. When the law says rabies shots, animals get rabies shots, and they should, and yours should too. What is true is this. In my whole life, not one of our cats has ever gone to town for fleas, worms from fleas, or the scratching sickness that comes with them, and the reason is not a secret medicine. The reason is that we treat the floor and not just the cat. The worm problem is a flea problem. The flea problem is a floor problem. Fix the floor, and most of the rest never happens. So let me show you the powder, and then let me show you the floor. The powder is called diatomaceous earth. I know that is a mouthful, so around here we just call it DE, and the bag at the feed store will say food-grade diatomaceous earth. Harris is one brand you will see. There are others. A 4-pound bag runs about $10 to $12, and a season of cat keeping uses maybe a pound of it, which is where my $2 comes from. Feed stores have carried it since the 1880s, when men first started digging it out of old, dried lake beds, and farmers have been mixing it into grain bins ever since to keep the weevils out. Here is what it actually is, because this matters. Millions of years ago, tiny water plants called diatoms grew shells around themselves, shells so small you cannot see one without a microscope. When they died, the shells drifted down and piled up into soft white rock. Ground fine, that rock becomes a powder that feels like flour in your hand. But to a flea, every grain is a piece of broken glass. It scratches through the waxy coat that keeps the flea's body from drying out, and the flea dries up and dies, usually within a day or two. No poison, no fumes, just dust doing what dust has always done. Now the first trick, and this is the one I would have you rewind for, because getting it wrong is the one real danger in this whole video. There are two kinds of DE food grade, which is the kind I am describing, safe enough that it is mixed into livestock feed, and pool grade, which is baked at high heat for swimming pool filters, and which is dangerous to breathe, for you and for your animals. The bags look similar. Read the bag. If it does not say food grade, leave it on the shelf. Second step, dust the floor before you ever dust the cat. Remember, 95 out of 100 fleas are living where the cat sleeps and walks, so that is where the powder goes first. Take a scoop of DE, and an old flour sifter or a jar with holes punched in the lid works well for this, and dust a thin layer over the cat's bedding, into the cracks of the floorboards, along the baseboards, under the porch, into the hay where the cats sleep, and anywhere you have seen the cat spend her afternoons. Thin is the word. You are salting a path, not building a snowdrift. And before the powder goes down, anything that can be washed should be washed. Blankets, bedding, the rug she sleeps on into hot water and hung in the sun. Sunlight and hot water kill eggs and larvae for free. And the powder holds the ground you just took back. One more caution while we are here. For kittens under 8 weeks, use the comb and the wash and the floor dusting, but keep the powder off their bodies. They are small, they groom constantly, and gentle winds with the little ones. Then take a broom and sweep it gently into the cracks in the carpet pile, down where the larvae and cocoons are waiting. Leave it there. It goes on working as long as it stays dry, and dry is the second trick. Wet DE does nothing. After rain blows into the barn, or after you wash a floor, the powder must go down again. Third step, now the cat. Take a pinch, no more than a teaspoon for a grown cat, and work it backward through the fur with your fingers along the spine, the base of the tail, the back legs. Stay away from the face. Cats wash themselves, and a little swallowed DE will not hurt them. Farmers feed it to hogs and hens on purpose, but nobody, cat or child, should be breathing clouds of any fine dust. So work close to the skin, work slow, and do it outdoors or in the barn, once a week. And here's the third trick, the one that separates the folks this works for from the folks who give up. You must keep it up for at least 4 weeks, even when you stop seeing fleas after the first one. Why 4 weeks? Because of those cocoons. They can sit tight through anything you do and hatch out fresh in week 3, and if your powder is gone by then, you are starting over. Outlast the cocoons, 4 weeks minimum. 4th step, and this one is my favorite because the cats do the work themselves. In a dry corner of the barn, we keep a shallow wooden box about the size of a bread pan, filled with dry sand mixed with a cup of DE. The chickens found it first, truth be told, because chickens love a dust bath more than anything. But the cats learn to roll in it too, especially in flea season, and every roll is a treatment they give themselves. If you have a covered porch or a garage corner, a box like that costs you nothing but the sand. 5th and last, get yourself a flea comb, the fine metal kind, about $4 anywhere, and a jar of soapy water. Comb the cat once a week and drop what you catch into the jar. The soap matters, and that is the little trick here, because plain water will not drown a flea. She rides on top of it like a bug on a pond. A drop of dish soap breaks the skin of the water, and down she goes. But the comb is not really for killing fleas, it is for counting them. Week 1, you might comb out a dozen. Week 3, 2 or 3. Week 5, none. That jar is how you know the floor is finally clean, without guessing and without a bill. Now let me pull back, because this was never really about fleas. When my grandmother said nobody washed the barn, she was handing me a way of thinking, and it reaches further than cats. Fleas are not just an itch. When a cat grooms herself and swallows a flea, and cats swallow fleas every day they have them, that flea can be carrying the young of the tapeworm, and a few weeks later there is a worm living in your cat, and you are back at the vet for worming medicine, wondering where it came from. It came from the flea. The flea came from the floor. And it is not only the cat that pays. Fleas bite children around the ankles. They ride into beds on a warm cat and wait in the blankets. A flea-troubled house is a house where everyone sleeps a little worse, and the family blames the cat when the cat is the one suffering most of all. English families spend, by the numbers I have seen, $300 or $400 a year per cat on flea and worm treatments, year after year, treating the 5 out of 100 and leaving the 95 to breed. Our coffee can cost $2 a season and treats the whole 100. And it is not only the money. A house that has been dusted, swept, and watched over is a house where small troubles are seen while they are still small. My grandmother has a saying about that, and it is the real point of this whole video, so I will give it to you the way she gives it to me. An animal you look at every day will rarely surprise you. The vet bill is usually the price of not looking. That is not against vets. When something is truly wrong, torn skin, a bad tooth, an animal off her feed for days, you go quick, and no powder on this earth replaces that. But most of what walks through a vet's door in flea season never needed to happen, and the fix was sitting at the feed store the whole time for the price of a cup of coffee. So here's what I want you to do tonight before you spend $1 more. Put a white sock over your hand or take a sheet of white paper and run it slowly over the places your cat sleeps. Comb her over the paper if she will let you. If you see black specks, wet one with a drop of water and smear it. If it smears rusty red, that is flea dirt, which is dried blood, and now you know for certain what you are dealing with and where it lives. Then this weekend, 1 bag of food grade DE, 1 flour sifter, 1 $4 comb, and 4 honest weeks. Under $20 all told, and most of the bag will still be full next summer, sitting in a coffee can on a shelf, waiting the way ours has waited for 3 generations. Tell me in the comments where you live and what your flea situation is right now, and tell me if you do the white sock test tonight, because I read every one of these and I want to hear what you find. The folks in my community already know this works. I am telling it for the folks who were never told. Next time, I am going to show you what my grandmother pours into the chicken's water trough on the first cold morning of every October. 1 splash of something from the pantry shelf that costs about $1, and why her hens lay through the winter when the neighbor's hens quit. Until then, keep your powder dry, keep looking at your animals, and remember that the people who kept barns before there were pet stores figured out most of this a long time ago. We just never stopped doing it.